Hey folks, this is Jason Lewis, the producer of the From the Shadows podcast. I just want to remind you about our website, fromtheshadowspodcast.com. We have a Facebook page. We would appreciate it if you like and follow. Also, join our discussion group on Facebook called After the Shadows. We have a Twitter feed. Please follow us on Twitter. It can be found with @podcast_from. Follow us on Instagram at From the Shadows Podcast. We have a YouTube channel. Go to the search bar at YouTube and put From the Shadows Podcast, and please subscribe to that channel. We are also on the Odyssey Radio Network, and we can be found there at odyssey1.com. We're still on the traditional podcatchers that everybody loves to listen to us on. We get a lot of feedback, so please rate the podcast and communicate with whether you're on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or Google Podcasts. We're there, and we appreciate it when you leave comments for us. We also have a Patreon page. It can be found at www.patreon.com/From the Shadows. You can receive books, stickers, coffee mugs, and special content just for our Patreon subscribers. Check it out for yourself and see what packages that we have to offer. Well, that's all I have for you right now, folks, and thanks for being a part of the From the Shadows podcast family. So with that being said, let's get this episode started.
So Howler, I never did really get your reaction to the new Ozark Howler sticker. You know, that is going to be that's available for all of the Ozark Howler fans to purchase, you know, from our website and our Patreon page. What would you think of that?
Well, you know, I was treating it like an illegitimate child. I was ignoring it.
Okay.
Because I had this illustrious vision of something that is not right.
So are you trying in a nice way to say that you didn't think it was a very good representation of the Ozark?
Well, the first thing I thought looked like it was a goat. Okay. And I got to thinking, you know, there's nothing scary or respectful about that goat, because, you know, the Mediterranean people I have worked with in the past would I'm trying to remember what that's called. Shawarma, maybe. They got a name for it. We used to eat it all the time overseas. But I know the Mexicans I work with now, they'd have a burrito. They'd have it in a skillet. I mean, they'd have that in a skillet today, this afternoon. You know what I mean?
Well, hey, look, the Ozark Howler as a cryptid does not, you know, it has a few representations that we could use for the artist to make that sticker. And I mean, sure, the profile picture, it's not, you know, it's kind of,
I imagine
as far as how scary. But the Ozark Howler itself is a scary thing. But we wanted to represent the true essence of you, you know, on the mic, being funny. So
there was a guy I went to high school with. It was a great artist in high school, and I called him up and I told him, and I couldn't get him to quit laughing about the fact that I was on a podcast, and I wanted him to write this thing. I told him I wanted to be like a kind of like more of a werewolf, and I wanted it standing on Bagnell Dam, which is the dam down here in Lake Ozark, you know.
Yeah.
And the predominant feature down here where I live is the lake. And I, you know, I'm trying to explain to him what I wanted. And he was supposed to give it to me, but I guess he ain't sober up enough to give it. You know, since I've asked him, he's gotten divorced, found a girlfriend, lost that girlfriend. It's complicated, blah, 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 blah. Because I tried to explain to him, I got some Korean gals in Minneapolis that would do it for about $35 or $40 to make it look like a work of art, but I don't want to drive to Minneapolis to do it. And, but you know, that first impression, I'm going to tell you what a guy told me about, the sheriff I used to work with told me about first impressions one day. And that's when I realized how screwed up the world is. It was my first job. I had to wear a uniform, right?
Yeah.
And I had these not goofy, but I had dress socks, but instead of being plain black, they would have like gold dots on them, or they were accented black dress socks. So the theory is when you were wearing your blue suit, you had blue stripes or whatever. So I'm working down
you were trying to be stylish.
Stylish, yeah, that was stylish back in the early '90s. So I had my foot up on my knee, and he come through there smoking a cigarette. And, he was an old school guy. He looked at him and he said, "Hey, Grogger, you can't be wearing socks. You need plain black socks." And I said, "Sir?" And he said, "From now on, I want you in plain black socks, because somebody's going to see your socks and they're not going to take you serious, and they're going to try you. And you're going to get your ass kicked because your socks."
Okay.
Blah, blah.
Okay.
And I said, "Okay," because what else are you going to say to the man? But, and then I was working with another officer when, a dude had been around a little bit, but didn't have any depth to him. He just had length of service, So sheriff walked away, and this deputy says, "Well, what do you think of that?" Or, he's serious. And I said, "Well, I've been in a lot of fucking fights, and I've had my ass kicked for several reasons, but never because of my goddamn socks." So, that either shows me, he was the biggest professional presence, right? You got to have a professional presence. So all that's to say is, if we go to Comic-Con or something, I might get my ass kicked because of that goat. So because of that goat picture, because they're not going to give me the proper respect as being the Ozark Howler. They're going to think I'm down here roping goats or something. Okay, so we need to beef up. We need to beef up the Howler sticker, or I'm in danger. I'm in danger.
Well, I'll tell you what. We'll make it. So when we come out with the Howler T-shirt, we'll make that. We'll beef that up a little bit. The stickers for fun. You put it on stuff and whatever. We want our buddy that's driving truck in England. We want him to put a little Ozark Howler sticker on his dashboard and stuff like that.
Maybe that's what you do. That's the one for European release, because they're a little more watered down, right?
Oh, you can't.
And then, well, yeah, and then the one you really have for the Ozarks, it needs the goat needs
a meth pipe or something. What?
Well, I was thinking of a pair of AR-15s crossed up on it or something, or a tattoo.
There you go.
A tattoo.
I'm all for that.
The goat needs to be on some kind of 4-wheel drive.
Yeah.
With a gun and a knife.
Oh, for God's.
Yeah.
Some loose women hanging on the truck.
Now you're talking. Wearing wife beaters.
See, this is why Jason's the producer and not the artistic brains.
Yeah, so I don't know. You're just gonna have to beef up the Howler. That's all.
Hey, I got the perfect girl that we can use for the prototype.
Oh God. Anyway, so Howler, it takes me back to the guy giving you advice about the socks. So does that mean that he at one time got his rear end kicked because of the socks he was wearing?
No. You know what it showed me? That he had never been in a fight in his life. And you wouldn't, what's funny is, in police academy, they have these things, bull in the ring. They have to introduce you to violence, because the majority of law enforcement officers nowadays, really the last 15, 20 years especially, have never been in a physical altercation in their life. And then they talk to people 4 or 5 days a week, 10 times a day, and everybody complies. So then when they get that one dude that doesn't comply, it freaks them out and overloads them. And that's when you get into police brutality sometimes, or you get weird stuff, because they don't have that mono, what's it called, mono on mono, or whatever, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. They don't have that. They don't have the ability to just wheel up to the curb and get out of the truck, because they think you need to be scared of them, right? So I don't know. No, it showed me he'd never been in a fight in his life. But by that time, he was in upper management. So, he was the elected sheriff. So he could say what he wanted. And people, he was gruff and tough and but I don't think he'd ever been in a fight in his life. Mm-hmm.
Which leads me to a story that was conveyed to me about a couple of my buddies that worked out at the sheriff's department, and I'm not going to use names because these guys probably listen to the podcast, and I don't want them. In fact, Jason, I think, knows one of them, and so the story was this younger sheriff's deputy, big dude, big strapping, physically fit, mean looking guy. Okay. Just like you said, how just looking at him, the guy should have been scared of him that were in the jail. Okay. And, he's now a highway patrolman, a decorated highway patrolman now. But these guys that were in the jail were guys that in our area were about his age, and they knew he genuinely was a pretty nice guy. You know, he wasn't the kind of guy that was just going to go in and smash somebody's skull around for looking at him cross-eyed. So they just gave him all kinds of grief. So he goes to the guy Jason and I know, who was probably the guy in charge of the shift, and says, these guys don't respect me. Well, what am I going to do? And my buddy, who's my age, 10, 15 years older than this big, young, strapping guy, says, you got to show him who's boss. Well, what do you mean show him who's boss? And he's like, follow me. And he said they walked up to the holding cell, and he said something into the guys in there, and one guy lipped off to him, and he goes, what'd you say? The guy gave it back to him, lipping off. And so our buddy steps inside the holding cell, just walks in, smashes the guy right into the ground. Says, don't you ever talk to me that way again. Gets up, walks out, and he's smiling like the cat that just ate the canary, and says, that's how you get their respect. You don't take any grief from them. And he said, the young guy's eyes are just wide as saucers. And I was like, okay, I get the picture. You got to go send a message, I guess. So he said that guy never had another problem then. But it took the old guy showing the young guy, who the young guy thought, look, I lift weights and I look good in my uniform, and they ought to respect me. And he's like, nah, you gotta earn their respect even in here. And he said, but once you get it, then everybody knows, don't mess with them.
We all fall in line.
Unless you want to beat down. But yeah, so I take that and I'm like, okay, that's a good lesson. Now, unfortunately, at the post office, it doesn't matter. Nobody respects the old guys.
Just the fact that, the county I grew up in, well, the sheriff that I was just talking about, the sheriff before him was a letter carrier before he got elected sheriff. So that dude had been the sheriff from the late 50s to early 60s to 1980. I think he had killed in a car wreck in 84 or 86. He was a letter carrier, and several of the old deputies had been letter carriers, but they were also World War II era fighting Marines from the Pacific. So, I mean, if you've seen Iwo Jima and Tarawa and a few of them, there ain't nothing that police academy is going to teach you. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think that's the problem. They have, I don't want to say about problem, just that we have got so many layers of weirdos. And first of all, the education, the mandated education that police officers have to have nowadays, the kids that get to be cops are very vanilla, sterile, kind of goody two-shoed kids. Does that make sense?
Yes.
They're not the blue-collar, rough and tumble guys that are trying to stay off the line at Ford or something. These guys are, and then the problem too is we've got some rough criminals out there, and I mean there is some dark individuals walking the streets of this country now that they didn't have 50 years ago. or we certainly didn't have very many. You know what I mean? You know, and nowadays, and you guys know the kind of people I'm talking about, there is just some weirdos out there and some rebels. And, you know, I've been watching this series on Netflix, not to get too far off topic, called The Last Kingdom. And it was about the Saxons and Danes fighting over England, you know, at the time.
Yeah.
And some of these people out there walking around the streets of America nowadays. So in you know, soft countries allow them to do this, but they're walking around basically conquering at will. You know what I mean? They don't worry about abiding by the law. They steal when they need to steal. They fight when they need to fight. They don't care if something's against the law or against the rules, or, you know, they're going to do what they want to do. And the government's response is just to pass some more laws. You know what I mean? Come on. So I don't know where it's going to end up.
Well, as long as it doesn't end up, as long as we don't end up in a society where people do start getting beat up over their socks.
Well, I don't know.
Or their sticker. Look, I hear you, man. Well, I can't have you getting grief because of your sticker.
That's right. They'll consider that weakness and try to exploit that.
But just wait till I roll out the Jason the Producer sticker.
That wouldn't be scary. If you just had his picture on it, it'd be scary enough. You know what I'm saying? That would be scary enough. But the problem with that is then it'd probably get you stopped in the inner city if they saw that sticker on your car.
More than likely.
Yeah, you might get. Don't drive to Minneapolis with that sticker. You'll get roughed up. You know.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.